The 2024 LCS Summer Split is about to start, and I'd figure I'd do a little bit of a power ranking. So previously, before, I did each separate video tackling each team and going super in depth. But this time around, I just felt like I'd be a little lazy and to take some effort off of my editor. Me, by the way. So we're going to be doing a power ranking, but specifically what'll be special about this is I'm going to show you on screen and stuff of, where I'm going to rank everybody, but also what I ranked them last time. So if you don't know, last time I did an article just ranking every single team. And then, of course, I did my in-depth video about each team. But we're going to put that on screen of my old ranking. And just as before, these power rankings are going to be for just the regular split, not playoffs or anything. Because when you get so far into the fucking prediction and shit, it just gets all wacky and stuff. And you just have to start throwing shit at the wall in order to get something to stick, some Nostradamus type shit. So I ain't about that. We're just about doing the regular split. So without further ado, obviously my top one team is going to be Dignitas. So they previously ranked 5th for the regular split. They got 6th in playoffs, and I ranked them 7th for the regular split. So now I'm ranking them first because they basically said, heard I was talking shit. So they were like, let's actually get some really good fucking players. So let's go over the former lineup, which was Rich, XU, Dove, Tomo, and Isles. So now currently they're going to have Licorice, Spica, Jensen, Sven, and Isles. So they're swapping out a lot of different pieces, right? 4 out of 5 pieces, and kept the one good piece, which I said, actually, that is the guy that you definitely keep in the piece that you definitely want to build up. Problem was that his contract was only for 2024. I'm not sure if they actually extended that recently, but it was clear that they should at least put some chips into Isles, because I actually think he has a lot of potential. And just looking at from his solo queue and everything, I think he actually is a very intelligent player. Now, as far as the roster construction that they've done this time, it looks like they just brought out the fucking wallet and was like, okay, we're actually going to get really good players. But not only that, I bet you they also got a bit of a discount, right? Because obviously, some of these players might have been just waiting and holding off to see exactly how the landscape goes for 2024 as far as like player salaries and everything. So once they figured out, okay, player salaries are just really low. No one's lowballing me. It's just the reality of the market. And of course, so I'm going to go, from top to bottom and just judge this roster. First, Licorice. I thought he was fucking, phenomenal last year. And really, of course, it was very unfortunate that he didn't get a team because Golden Guardians obviously dissolved. So he deserves a spot. And there were plenty of different top laners that he could have replaced anyways. Licorice is just an all-around good player. And I think he'll actually function quite well in this team as well too. And if you look at just this roster itself, one of the big problems that I'm going to have though with it is who the fuck is the wild card? Because and any of these players, I don't look at any of them as like who's going to do the crazy shit on the roster. Now, there is the caveat that, well, they're all just really fucking good players anyway, so you don't really have to worry about that. But that's going to be my big caveat, is that if this team does stagnate, that's going to be the reason, is because all of their play styles, realistically, there's no one that does crazy shit. You look at Jensen, he's not a crazy player. You look at Spica, yeah, he'll do some cheeky plays and whatnot, but he's not actually going to go overboard. He's a very measured jungler. Obviously, Licorice is very measured in the top lane. Sven is a very, very conservative player in bot lane. And then Isles, I guess he could do some rookie magic and whatnot, but I don't expect that from him, especially taking directions from Sven as well too. But so I think this is a great team for Licorice to, get his bearings back into. And I actually think as far as like the rest of the field is concerned, I have no concern for Licorice. I think he'll just be a serviceable, good top laner. And on top of that, I think a lot of people forget that Licorice can have some standout carry games if you allow him to do that. Like way back when, he actually used to play a lot of carry top laners. So, he has that at least in his repertoire. If Dignitas want to go that direction and say, okay, we need a little bit of, Chemical X, call it, for Powerpuff Girls. Shout out, if you know, Cartoon Network. But they have, if they want to do that, that's, I think, a good direction that they can actually lean into. And I would actually try and push Licorice to be more of that type of player. But one of the other huge caveats that I'm going to give here is the fact that we're going into a crit ADC meta. And if you know anything about Sven, that's the perfect fucking meta for this guy. He came back at the right time. Let's talk about Sven, dude. So Sven has been a great ADC for as long as time immemorial, right? He's obviously had his accolades over in the EU LCS or, the LEC, and then he came over to North America and was still a great ADC player. He couldn't find a spot as far as ADC because obviously Cloud9 with Berserker took that over, but he was still a very good ADC, right? You could consider him top 3 at least. So I think him fitting into this roster and having, I guess, the guiding hand towards Isles, that is going to be the prime fucking recipe as far as Isles actually learning the game professionally. And I think this is going to be great experience for this kid. He needs to take this split and absorb all the fucking knowledge that he can from Sven, especially considering that Sven was a support player, for a little bit too. So he's going to be able to see things from both angles. And I am actually curious to see how Sven plays now differently from the perspective of, having that experience as a support player. How is he going to play ADC differently? Because I'm going to tell you, it changes your perspective. I had played ADC for the very beginning of solo queue, and then I switched over to support. And I'll tell you, once you play both roles, you understand both roles magnitudes differently. So I know that's going to help Sven's game incredibly. And then it's also going to help him know what his support wants from him. And then maybe he can also give guidance to his support of, hey, this is what I want from you. And I know that you're capable of doing this, this, and this, right? So overall, I think this is going to be a really good roster. And then not to mention Spica. I think Spica is one of the best North American junglers in our current era. I think he's an incredible solo queue talent. He's very fucking good. He's just phenomenal. I even played with him once actually in solo queue, and he was fucking phenomenal. Just on the map everywhere. He knew exactly what to do at what times. He knew exactly when to invade, what he could actually do during the invades, and he always had an objective in mind. So I think Spica is one of the best junglers in North America. I think he can actually give Blabber a run for his money. And it's going to be interesting, I think, his matchup into Inspired, because Inspired is a very control-heavy jungler. So it will be interesting to see how his style clashes against Inspired. Because realistically, I see Inspired as like kind of the kryptonite to Blabber, which Blabber is notoriously kind of bad into control-style junglers, say, for instance, Xmithy. So if we look at that and we see, okay, well, if an aggressive style jungler goes into Inspired, which Spica, he's more balanced, I would say. He's not necessarily aggressive, but he's not passive either. He's not very control style. Then it's kind of like the wild card of how this matchup is going to pan out, which is gonna be one of his biggest hurdles in this split, obviously, because FlyQuest is gonna be a good team, right? Surprise, surprise. So the last name I'm going to bring up here is Jensen. Jensen, I don't think he had that great of a split, honestly, on FlyQuest. I think he was a very serviceable mid laner, as far as like playoffs were concerned, or going into Worlds or whatnot, or MSI. During the regular split, he was actually pretty good, but knowing the levels that Jensen can get up to, it was still, I think, below his level. So I'm actually gonna be looking out for to see if Jensen can actually like step up his level and try and be more of a carry player, because if we're looking at this roster specifically, there really isn't any other different roles for people to carry. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be Licorice maybe can get into that carry mindset and carry role, but then, you know, there's got to be someone else that actually has to be able to do this. And I don't think Spica is necessarily a carry jungler. I think he's more of a facilitator of everybody else. So I hope that Jensen steps up, but even if he doesn't, this is why I can even still rank Dignitas first, because he's just good enough to get to first place without even having to quote unquote try, right? So there's number one team, right? Number two power ranking is going to be FlyQuest. So not a big surprise here. FlyQuest were first in the regular split. They finished second in playoffs, and I had ranked them third for finishing the regular split, you know, before the split even happened. So now the only switch that they made was obviously removing Jensen and installing Quad, not Quid, Quad. So their current lineup is going to be Bwipo, Inspired, Quad, Masu, and Busio. So to go over how their split went, I think Bwipo performed quite good during the regular split. He was actually able to stunt on a lot of different top laners. A lot of people will have MSI fresh in their mind and say, oh, Bwipo is shit. You know, he overreaches, he overextends, and he gets punished very easily. That would be correct for MSI, but for the regular LCS, he's actually a very good top laner. So I'm going to give him some credit here. But that's the thing, is that he often tries to do very kind of overreaches or experiments. And to a certain extent, that's good. And I think that you need that. You need that type of person within an entire roster. So I'm not necessarily going to hold that against Bwipo, because guess what? It's the different side of the coin. Now, oftentimes, actually, Bwipo's coin will pop up heads most of the time, you know, like 90% of the time, but 10%, he's going to do something fucking stupid. But that just comes with the territory of Bwipo. So when you have him on your roster, you need to expect that and then draw stability from all the different other areas, which I actually think this roster kind of does that. Now, when you look at the bot lane themselves of Masu and Busio, Masu actually performed pretty well in the regular split and also in playoffs as well too. He was like the best player, in fact. And so I think he's going to shape up to be an even better player, obviously, because he has room to grow because he's such a young player. But Busio as well too. He can start taking more and more leadership now. And if you saw this kind of bot lane roster in playoffs and also at MSI, they didn't really look that great. Busio didn't really look that great. And I think it might have been nerves, right? And having him get all this stuff out of the way, you know, of actually going to playoffs or going to MSI, his first big international tournament, he can actually shake that off. And we're going to see, you know, the salt that he's worth, so to speak, right? Because if he's not able to actually perform in this upcoming playoffs, and we can clearly see that it's nerves, or, you know, say perhaps he goes to Worlds, and then obviously if he underperforms, you know, to what we saw for, you know, spring split, or hopefully in summer split as well too, during this iteration, that if he does perform poorly, I think we can all chalk that up to nerves, and I would then start to question exactly if you actually want to start investing in this player. So this is the make or break split, I think, for Busio. I'm not going to be concerned for him during regular playoffs. I think he's actually a really good player. And, you know, he does pretty ballsy plays, and he's actually able to go around the map, and he actually knows what to do around the map. And I think some of that he is taken from, you know, his solo queue knowledge, because he's a very good solo queue player. But when it comes to playoffs, it seems like he gets in his own head. So I want to see if he actually changes. He can actually start playing the game like he normally does and calm his nerves, and I think he'll be a phenomenal player. So we'll see. That's going to be a big question mark. I actually don't know. But as far as the regular split, I think he's serviceable to actually get into, second place here, which is why I ranked FlyQuest second. Inspired, everyone looked at Inspired and said, okay, he's a pretty good jungler, but he's not phenomenal. I think after Spring Split and obviously after MSI, no one can say that he's not a phenomenal jungler. He is really fucking good, because it's incredibly underrated to state how good he is at facilitating his entire team and plugging up holes, because that's what he did the entire playoffs and the entire MSI. He just constantly plugged holes and actually was able to carry his team to some victories. So I think now we can look at Inspired and say, okay, if you're going to be the hole plugger, call it, hopefully your bot lane doesn't need, for you or for them to rely on you. And so hopefully this can actually unlock Inspired so that he can make proactive plays that he wants to do on the map, because that's what I think of Inspired as far as how good he is, or like what his strengths are on the map, is that he's able to control the other jungler. I think that's his biggest strength, but he's not able to do that if he's constantly trying to react to what his bot lane is doing. So if this is the case, then I think he'll actually shape up if his bot lane shapes up. I think this entire split is going to be predicated on the bot lane itself, and if they can actually shape up and become not as fucking rookies as they were before. So this is a lot to ask, and I know it is, but it's either put up or shut up. Like, sorry, you don't have a lot of time. There are tons of other players that can actually take your spot, because there are only 8 fucking teams now. So you guys are in the hot seat. Quad, sorry guys, I just don't know anything about Quad. Obviously he comes from LCK. I think Challengers League, right? And then obviously he was in the NACL as well too. So yeah, and also FlyQuest Academy won first place, right? So clearly he's supposed to be a really good player. I don't know how good. I haven't watched any of his tape, so I have no idea. But given that he's Korean, I mean, us Koreans are pretty fucking good at the game. Like, come on. I mean, if I can get fucking masters, then we have no hope in North America. So Quad coming over, I think he's probably going to be serviceable, at least. So serviceable is enough to get top 4 if, this is the case. So what I'm looking for FlyQuest is for more stability in the bot lane, and I think that may happen. I have hope for especially Masu, but I hope Busio shapes up. That's end of the story for FlyQuest. Third place is going to be Cloud9. Now, you may be wondering, why did I rank Cloud9 so far down, this time? Because they got rid of the problem child, right? So first, let's go. They got third for both the regular split and playoffs, and I ranked them first for the regular split previously, before the season started. And obviously, I think everyone ranked them first, in fact, just because of all the names, right? And all of the synergy previously. But they have removed Fudge, and they've got Thanatos. And obviously, the rest of the lineup is Blabber, Jojo, Berserker, and Vulcan. So now let's skip over Thanatos. He is supposed to be like this super hyped Korean top laner. Everyone's saying, oh, fuck, like, how did you even get this player? He was supposed to even be in LCK itself, right? So they picked him up, they fucking dragged him over, and they were like, all right, this guy is supposed to be the next hype prospect. And not only that, lest I remind you, some of the best imports to import over into North America have always been top laners. Why? Because of micro, right? It's a very isolated lane, and actually macro too, astonishingly, even if they are a rookie. For some reason, it just seems like Korean players just have way leagues better macro. And obviously this is reflected in professional play as well. with like coordinated teams and shit. But as far as like LCK players coming over, it's always top laners that have better micro. Obviously, we saw Summit before completely stomp the entire league, solo killing fucking everybody. So I'm not going to say we should expect this from this Thanatos guy. I think Summit was kind of like, like once in not a lifetime, but once in a couple years type of top laner. He's like a step under the Shy and step under Shy and step under, someone like Smeb or whatever. But he was a fucking phenomenal micro top laner. And he was actually, now that I think about it, he was actually one of the stupidest top laners for macro. So, all right, take away what I said about macro for LCK top laners. He was actually the exception of that. So Thanatos coming over, cool. I don't really know too much about him. Now, the rest of the team, I'm just going to talk as an amalgamation. The huge fucking problem with this team was, first of all, not JoJo. He was the shit. He was one of the best mid laners in the entire league, right? He was actually the reason why Cloud9 had even won any of their fucking games the entire split, which is crazy to see. The entire split, he was the reason why they were winning games over and over again. So as long as he keeps the same level, even if he goes down a little bit, as long as everyone brings their level up, Cloud9's going to be fine. But the problem is, and why I have them ranked third, is that Berserker and Vulcan they just look like they don't have much synergy together. And especially Vulcan. Vulcan has dropped the ball so fucking hard, man. And one of the big things that I can immediately see with Vulcan and his problem is that he just can't fucking play enchanters. I don't know what it is with this guy, but he just can't play enchanters. And I hope he's been working on that in the off season, because he's had plenty of fucking time to reflect on it since he didn't go to MSI. So he better be working on enchanters, because guess what? We're going to be in a crit ADC meta. Now, that's also why I can rank them a little bit higher, because they're still good enough as a bot lane. But that's going to be one of their downfalls, if there is going to be a downfall of Cloud9 to where they actually go lower than third, is that Vulcan will just look like shit, and the rest of Cloud9 will look like shit without Vulcan as an initiator. Because I think one of the big problems, and I don't know if this is true, I don't have any information of their comms, but it seems like Vulcan doesn't know how to lead from an enchanter position. Because you have to have like two different mindsets as you're playing as a support player when you play Engage versus Enchanters. They're like completely different, spheres. I would make it akin something similar to top laners, when they're playing carries like Fiora versus they're playing something like Ornn. You have to have completely different mindset in order to play that, right? And I think this is one of the only other roles, in fact, to where you have to have diametrically opposed styles. So it becomes, actually, it's very difficult to be a professional player at the support position just because of that aspect. So don't necessarily blame Vulcan for this fault. But, brother, you are a professional player. So you got to get, Nami into your repertoire and shit like that, because guess what? It's going to come back. I'm telling you. Crit is in right now. I'm seeing, picks and bans for things like Caitlyn or Jinx. And then, of course, you have Ashe, which has always just been OP as fuck. I don't know why professional players didn't play her before, because the hawk shot is just completely invaluable. So that's why Cloud9's ranked third. And then on top of that, and here's my other huge caveat, right? Because I said, well, the bot lane is going to be probably the downfall of Cloud9, especially Vulcan, and the fact that he can't play enchanters. But the other huge fucking caveat that I'm going to give is Reapered. So Reapered is now coaching this team. Now, if you know anything about Reapered, is he can pull off miracles in the draft phase. Not necessarily in playoffs, semifinals or finals, but he can actually do some fucking magic tricks when it comes to draft. And we also have best of threes returning, which is like, I don't know who fucking planned this. I don't know who Jack had to call in order to get this favor in, but he picked the perfect time to actually scoop this guy up. So if you don't know, Reaper had previously been in the LJL over in, I think it was Sengoku Gaming. And obviously the LJL is a one region team. So, his team actually wasn't able to do that well, but whatever, like Dead FM is Dead FM. So Reaper coming back, I think is going to be a big boon for Cloud9. Now, if you know anything about Reaper's style, is that he does lean a lot into the strengths of players rather than having them work on their weaknesses. I even think Licorice had said this before in an interview with Thorn. So, and it is actually apparent that he does that. He just avoids all the fucking weaknesses and he just focuses on plugging up the holes. And I think that's why he's got so much success, immediately. And also why Cloud9 kind of stagnates over time. So we'll actually see if Reaper is able to, shape up his coaching style to where maybe he could more lean into actually fixing weaknesses instead of just constantly patching up holes in the ship. So for now, I think it's good enough for Cloud9 to get third. Best of threes are really going to work in this team's favor, and that's why I'm putting them third. Otherwise, I would probably actually put them lower. So, Team Liquid is going to be fourth. So, they got fourth in the regular split, and it's very appropriate that I put Team Liquid fourth too. First place, obviously in playoffs, they won the spring split, and I had ranked them fourth before the season even started. So, this time, I don't think it's going to be any different, man. Like, they have the same roster of Impact, APA, Yeon, and Core JJ. Now, what we saw from them during the regular split was that this team can ramp up like a motherfucker. First of all, Impact, obviously, he ramps up like crazy. Everybody knows what happens when playoffs comes and you have Impact on your team, right? So, Impact, obviously a solid player. People forgot about Dre. They forgot about Impact. You have who actually shaped out to be a pretty fucking good jungler. He doesn't take too risky of plays. He just has enough risk in order to, be somewhat of a big bang for his actual team to get the snowball rolling and whatnot. So I think he's actually a good facilitator for his team, and he allows his team to actually get to scaling towards the late game, right? Which obviously Team Liquid, that was their entire strategy headed into playoffs. APA, I am actually very concerned for this player. I think when you come to best of three structure, he's going to be able to get banned out, and people are going to be able to shape their ban phase around APA specifically. And if he doesn't get better at different champions, and especially considering that we're headed into a different meta to where it's going to be more ADC focused rather than mid lane focused, this is where I think maybe there's going to be some holes in the Team Liquid ship. So obviously, they're still good enough to get fourth. They had some of the best fucking macro. They actually had the best macro in North America. And I think they had some of the best macro in the entire West, in fact. I think they could hold a candle to a lot of these other different teams. Even headed into MSI, it was actually really good. It's just, a fault of their pick ban phase, and also just the inherent fact that they just don't have that good of players. Now, Yeon really fucking surprised me. Everyone is pointing out that they think, fucking Masu is the best ADC in LCS. I thought Yeon was not leagues better, but I think he was significantly better than Masu. His positioning is fucking crazy. Every single team fight that I see this guy in, he has like pixel perfect positioning. The 3Ps, yeah, pixel perfect positioning. That's pretty dope. I think I'll patent that. And so I think this guy is set up to be a fucking phenomenal ADC. I think we're going to see this guy for years to come. And what's really cool is that Core JJ is shaping up to be more and more back into his old form. I'm not saying that he actually, is old school Core JJ, but he's getting there. And I hope that if he can kind of expand his champion pool a little bit more, go into more enchanters and things like that, Team Liquid actually stand a fighting chance to maybe get up higher than 4th and actually, start to ramp up for playoffs. So I wouldn't actually count this team out for winning the entire split. Obviously I'm ranking them 4th for the regular split, but this team has some potential. But I think the huge fucking caveat is obviously the champion pool of APA. I think it's still a massive issue. It hasn't gone away. And just because the meta ended up being, fucking Aurelion Sol, it obviously leaned into his wheelhouse, with Talia, Aurelion Sol, he could play Tristana mid. All those things are great, but you need some more picks in your fucking pool. So I hope he's working on his Azir. I hope he's working on Orianna. I don't know how the fuck he even got into professional play without knowing how to play Orianna. In fact, that's in every mid laner's champion pool. That's the go-to champion. There's certain go-to champions for every single role. You have, you need to be able to play Lee Sin in the jungle position. You need to be able to play Caitlyn in the ADC position, right? There are things that you just need to fucking know in this game. So if APA doesn't shape up and he doesn't at least get some more control mages within mid lane, I think he's going to have massive fucking problems. So here's to hoping he does that. I'm not, going to say that he can't, but the odds are against him because obviously people are going to keep pointing towards his one-trick tendencies, and he didn't really do any favors for that and breaking that stereotype within the regular split of, spring split or even in playoffs. So we'll see. 5th is going to be 100 Thieves. Now, they got 2nd for the regular split. They got 4th in playoffs, and then I had ranked them 8th. So this is my biggest deviation of getting it way fucking wrong. Right? So here's my justification. So they have the same roster of Sniper, River, Quid, Meech, and Ayla. Now, when you look at this entire roster, they're very young, right? There's nobody with really any experience besides River, and River is obviously a LCK player. Of course he played in Golden Guardians and shit like that, but it's very unexpected that he would be able to lead a team. But it seems like he's able to lead a team. So that's why I'm going to place this team significantly higher. I'm bumping them up. I think they performed well above my expectations. And I think a 2nd place regular split is fucking phenomenal for this team. And even a 4th place in playoffs is very respectable. I think headed, into summer split, they can hold their heads high and say, we got 4th. That's really good for the roster that we have. For the young roster that we have, that's phenomenal. So headed into this for the regular season, I think they're going to have way harder time because Cloud9 is going to obviously look to be ramping up. I think Reaper is going to be able to cover a lot of the gaps that they have. Obviously, Dignitas is a team now, so they're having more competition now. And if you look at just, I guess, the potential of 100 Thieves itself, I think Sniper is shaping up to be a really good top laner. He was obviously able to solo kill a lot of different fucking top laners, and which is very surprising because usually when we see a North American talent, come in and they were dominating solo queue or whatever, they come into the league and we're like, okay, can you really do this in the LCS stage? And they can't. But for Sniper, actually, this is a breath of fresh air. And what I said previously and why I had placed Sniper so far down on the radar was that I had my reservations on if he could break his, call it family curse, right? Of being one trick pony. Because if you know anything about Sniper, is his brother Viper was a one trick, right? And, I put in that video of reviewing 100 Thieves that he even said that he put too much time into playing Riven, and that kind of limited his champion pool or limited his play style and bled over into other champions, so to speak. Now, I'm not sure why that didn't happen with Sniper. Maybe actually because Sniper actually technically, I think, had a better champion pool as far as a solo queue player, right? Because he played Aurelia and he played Jace. And so, and especially Jace has at least a little bit of a different playstyle than obviously Riven, where you could just kind of spam your Q on cooldown and do different combos and things like that. So I think he's actually set up for success. But realistically, I don't see them beating the field because the field is just way harder this time around. Now, as far as River, I think River was a phenomenal jungler. I think that was actually the major reason as to why 100 Thieves even won any of their fucking games. And I thought personally that he was the best jungler in the entire league, like by far. He did so much shit on the map. He was able to carry games. He was able to plug holes. He was able to do some control style, and he was able to actually pull off the fucking ganks that, everyone looks at River and says, oh, he can't fucking keep getting away with this. Yet he does over and over again. And I'm not sure how he does, but he's such a creative jungler. And that's something that I love to see from a jungler. I think that is one of the biggest superpowers a jungler can have is creativity. Because at the end of the day, what jungle is about, I think, and I even made a video on this previously, was I think the jungle role is actually very psychological. Once you start getting up to a high enough level within, call it solo queue, your mechanics are good, your macro is pretty good. It then becomes, okay, let's start playing some mind games and let's start getting into the head of my opponents. And I think River does that phenomenally. I can't but help think that River is actually an incredibly intelligent player. Because he's just able to do these different gank angles that no one expects. So I expect him to continue doing this. Quid obviously proved to be a very, very good mid laner. I did not expect that. I thought he was a very shit mid laner in 2023. I didn't know why 100 Thieves had kept him. I said they should have kicked this guy. He has no business even playing in the LCS. But okay. All right, dog. You shut me the fuck up. Okay. All right. So, stick with the guy. He's performing very well. And then their bot lane of Meech and Ayla, they just exist. If I'm going to be honest, they just exist. And the thing is that since, as I said before with all the other rosters, we're heading into a crit ADC meta. So that's going to become a problem for 100 Thieves. I said, they got second in the regular split, in, the spring split. And then me moving them down to fifth, predicted. I just don't think that their bot lane is going to be able to hold this up. Because if we're going into a crit ADC meta, that means that Ayla is going to have to play enchanters. That means that Sniper is going to have to learn tanks. Which he was actually pretty good on tanks, and right, like his Cassante was really fucking good. He was able to get different flank angles, because here's the thing about modern League of Legends today, and I think we're gonna see this a lot headed into this meta. If it's going as I predict it to go, which is crit ADC metas and everything going to be surrounding building up the crit ADC meta and doing a front to back and doing 5v5s, right? Is that if that's the case, what we're going to see currently with this current iteration of League of Legends is that you could still do flank angles because of the geometry of the map itself and how Riot has opened up around the Drake pits and around the Baron pit, is that it allows the top laners to actually get different flank angles, which is also why I think Cassante is so fucking OP. Is so you can actually not play a super hardcore beefy tank, right, like Ornn or whatnot. You can actually play different things, like a bruiser. And this might actually work out in Sniper's favor. He doesn't actually need to play the full frontal, 5v5 tank like Ornn. He could actually play something like Cassante and still function similarly and start looking for the flank angles and stuff. So I think that's one of the big caveats, but I don't think their bot lane is going to be up to snuff as far as being able to be the focal point for putting all your eggs in their basket. I think that's going to be probably the biggest downfall for 100 Thieves, which is why I can't rank them any higher than 5th place. 6th is going to be NRG. So, 6th place for NRG. They had placed 6th actually in the spring split for the regular split. They'd placed 5th for playoffs, and I had ranked them 2nd. So, this is one of the only other big deviations I had, right? So everyone had thought, okay, NRG, they kept the same roster, right? And they're still keeping the same roster now of Dokla, Contracts, Palafox, FBI, and Huhi. Now, when you look at this roster, I look at it and see, okay, they have decent lineup, right? They have decent firepower in almost all their roles, but the huge problem with it is they just don't really have any cohesion anymore. And I think with the introduction of having Huhi into, this NRG lineup was that it just seems like all the comms or something, I don't know, something to where their mid game and their late game is just really shit. They just don't know what to do on the map. And it looks like they're just really lost. So just as an aggregate themselves, I'm not really going to go into individual play because I think realistically, this team's problems are in aggregate. They're just about their team play. And it's unfortunate that realistically, I don't know how they fix it. I think the only way that they fix it actually is just by bettering their comms, but I don't know what the fuck their comms look like. So, sorry to say, but the segment for NRG is just going to be short. I just think they need to fix their comms. I can't rank them any higher than 6th. I think they're going to get 6th. They haven't made any significant changes to, their roster themselves. And unless their coaching staff is specifically telling them like, yo, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, I don't think this team is going to improve. And I think they've hit their ceiling. And, people had said, okay, in 2023, this was a miracle that they were actually able to win, which I think it largely was because when you look at this roster on paper, none of the players are actually phenomenal individually. And, no disrespect to the players themselves, but on paper, no, they aren't really phenomenal individually. And that is still the case to this day. Just because they won a split doesn't mean that suddenly they're just better players. So, and part of their magic before and why they won was their team cohesion, but they don't fucking have that anymore. So there's something wrong with their comms, and they need to get Huhi on board. They need to figure out how to incorporate him and incorporate his comm style, or maybe Huhi needs to, change his entire play style. And I'm not sure if that's actually beneficial for Huhi, because guess what? You get Huhi on a team because he commands the team, right? Like he's inherently a shot caller. Everybody knows that. So if you got Huhi on your team, then that's what you kind of expect, and you should have gave power to him in order to be a shot caller. So if I were the coaching staff on this team, I would say you need to restructure your team around Huhi and not Huhi around the rest of the team. I think it's going to be easier to do it that way. So that would just be, I don't know, my advice, my sage advice for this squad. So for 7th, I'm going to do Shopify. And then obviously Immortals is going to be 8th. So Shopify did actually end up 7th last split, and I had ranked them 5th. So formerly they had Boogie as their jungler, and now they have Fake God, Tomio, which he's coming from the NACL, and then you have Insanity, Bvoy, and Zazel. Now, I'm going to talk about the pieces that remain first. So actually, I was pleasantly surprised a little bit by Zeyzal. I thought he performed quite well. I'm not going to say he was phenomenal, but for coming back into the LCS, I think he performed a little bit above my expectations. I think he is actually a pretty solid support, but everything else is just kind of falling apart around him. And one of the cool things about Shopify, and the reason why I like Shopify, is because they were willing to do experimental drafts and things like that. And I think that's some of the magic that Shopify actually brings to the league, which is why, even though I'm ranking them 7th, I still think they're a fucking entertaining team. So I think they're actually worth watching, even if, I rank them this far and down in the power rankings. I still think if you see a Shopify matchup going into, the summer split, I still think you should watch the game because it's just very entertaining. But here's going to be the other caveat, is that Boogie is obviously removed from the team. But we'll get to that in a second. Fake God, I don't think he is a great top laner. I'm just going to say it. I don't think he's a good top laner. I think he has several faults. In fact, he's not very good micro. He's not very good macro. There isn't like any redeeming quality that I can see from him, unless, I don't know, maybe he's good in calms or whatnot. I actually hear he's a very jovial player, right? So he brings up team atmosphere, things like that. He's like, but he's a good guy though, right? So like, he's like one of those players, which like, hey, fine. That's worth something in a team atmosphere. I get it. But I need to see something else from you in the server. So if you're going to stay on this team, and if you have any hope of being drafted, for 2025, it's probably this put up or shut up time for Fake God, because realistically, as I said before, with all the other teams and whatnot, there's a limited number of spots now. There's 8 slots. So your job is kind of on the line. So if Fake God can step it up, and maybe if he can start pulling out some actual, 1v1 players or whatnot, I don't expect this team necessarily to go anywhere from the top side of the map. Tomio, he's been a big prospect from the NACL, but realistically, I mean, if we're looking at this, you look at the bench and you look at the rest of the field itself. First of all, he's not better than, I don't think, any other jungler besides Armeo, probably. But additionally, he's not even probably better than XU, which is the unfortunate part, right? And obviously, if you guys didn't know, XU, he was previously on Dignitas, but then he got dropped for a better jungler, right, of Spica, because if you have the chance between XU or Spica, you're gonna pick Spica like 100% of the time. Like, I'm sorry, but you're just gonna do that. But with that said, XU he had like really good plays. I thought he was a really good jungler for, his level, being a rookie and whatnot, and for him actually making some ballsy plays and actually being the ignition source for Dignitas. So looking at Tomio, I hope that maybe he's of similar stuff. I hope that he can be the ignition source for this team, because when I look at the rest of the roster itself, they don't have a whole lot going for them. There's no like individual firepower itself anywhere except B-Voy. I called it before. Go fucking check the tapes. I said that Shopify betting on B-Voy was the guarantee. This guy looked fucking cracked. Headed from what was it, CB Law? He looked cracked. So pulling him out of that, obviously you aren't paying him a ton of money. And I said the roster construction of Shopify themselves was very intelligent as well too, from just a financial perspective. And I think this iteration around, I think it's kind of intelligent, taking your chances on Tomio. But Boogie, I thought he was actually your, big bang for the team itself. And if you're measuring the weight of, okay, Boogie is a known source, a known quantity, and then you pull out Tomio and you say, okay, let's actually see if you're a good player. maybe it's actually worth that. I can see the logic behind that. I can see the logic that Revan has used of, okay, well, if the cap of Boogie was this, then, question mark. I don't know if you guys have seen that Simpson episode to where I think it was, or maybe it was Family Guy, where the guy's like, oh, well, maybe I could get a yacht inside the mystery box. And then the salesman's like, or you could just get this yacht. Like, you have the choice of the yacht or the mystery box. So this is what it seems like Shopify is doing, but I can see why they made the change, because in all honesty, Boogie was one of the players to where he was actually too chaotic. I think the right amount of chaos, if you're doing it intelligently, is something like a River or something like an in fact. I think both of those players themselves, like River is probably the exception, so I don't think you should. If there's anything to say about River, you don't actually want to play the play style of River. Like, if you're trying to give a young player advice at all, you don't show him VODs of River and say, play like this. That would be a stupid idea as a coach, right? Then I don't think the coach knows what they're doing if they say play like this guy, right? Because it's way too abstract and it's way too high level for a beginning player like that. But something like or something like XU even, I thought both of those players took an appropriate amount of risk in the spring split. So when you look at Boogie, he took just way above that. I thought some of the plays that he made were actually really fucking stupid. I remember obviously that play where he hopped over the Baron pit to invade into the enemy jungler, and this was like at 3:30, I think, 3 minutes and 30 seconds. He flashes over the wall to try and invade and steal red buff, and then he dies because he tries and steal like the Raptors 2 or some shit like that, and the enemy team just collapsed on him. So plays like that obviously are, I think, the reason why they got rid of Boogie, because his plays were just fucking insane. And that's just a wild card that you can't manage, so to speak. So if you're able to get Tomio on this and say, okay, just don't play like that, and your roster spot is safe, I think that's actually a good bet. So as far as like from the GM perspective, I think this is a pretty good idea, but I don't think it's necessarily going to move you up any further, especially considering that the field actually got even harder because Dignitas is actually a team this split, and Cloud9, hopefully they get their shit together, and I think they should be a more formidable team. Especially considering that they got rid of one of their weak points, which was the top lane in Fudge. So I don't think Shopify are going to, move any different, but I don't think that's the purpose of Shopify this year. I don't think they're trying to go, to try and win the entire split. Obviously, even if they change one or two pieces, they aren't going to win the split. I'm just sorry, just to break it to you, they aren't going to breaking news, they aren't going to fucking win the split. So the best you can do as a GM is to try and change it up and see what good pieces that you can get for next year. Obviously, you extend the contract for Bvoy. Maybe you extend the contract for Zeyzal as well too. And then you see if you can get something out of Tomio. This is Tomio's split to say, okay, can you actually be a professional player in the LCS? So we'll see. Immortals, obviously 8th. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. I ranked them 6th last time. They have the same roster of Castle, Armeo, Mask, Tactical, and Olay. This roster is pretty bad. They don't seem to have a whole lot of cohesion. Their jungler doesn't seem to get a whole lot accomplished. I said before that I thought Armeo was a vegan jungler. I still think he's a vegan jungler. Until he proves me fucking otherwise, he needs to start taking more risks, and he needs to start taking command of what Immortals, or like the snowball of Immortals, because you think the jungle position, if anything, what they are is a snowball position. You need to get things started. And if you look at the rest of the roster, where the fuck else is it really going to come? Castle, he's the protege of Keen. Keen is obviously, he's not going to be a super carry top laner. He's more of a balanced top laner, more towards the tanky side than obviously the carry side. So obviously Castle's going to take away from that from his sensei. So Mask, he was actually a pretty good mid laner. I think that's one good thing that we can take away from this squad. But that was really their only bright spot. Tactical and Olay. Tactical looked bad. He looked bad. Olay, he actually looked decent. He didn't look good. I'm not going to say Olay performed great, but he looked better than I thought he... Well, actually, I thought he would come into the league, and I thought he would actually perform very well because it seems like League of Legends itself is going more towards a roam style, and that is Olay's style itself. But he didn't accomplish a whole lot during his roams, and even still, I don't think he roamed enough. So with this, I think Immortals is going to stay in 8th place. I don't see any way that they're going to come up from 8th place. In fact, Anero is their new head coach. Previously Sharks was their head coach before. Anero, I think he is great at facilitating growth from young players. The problem is that this roster isn't really that young. You have Armail, you have Tactical, and you have Olay. Those 3 players, they've been in the league for a very long time. Armail, if you remember, he was obviously in a TSM previously before. So this guy has had plenty of fucking chances to play in the LCS, and he doesn't seem up to snuff. And I don't think Anero is going to be able to improve this guy's play unless somehow he instills with them confidence. I think Armail's problem is confidence. So if Anero is able to build up this guy's confidence, get him, to have a little bit of a bigger head, then maybe he shapes his play around. But Armail's a known quantity, and XU is lurking in the shadows, which could add some extra spice to this roster. So, if Armail, if there's anything that's going to put a fire under this guy's ass, I think Anero should try and get XU as a substitute into this roster and say, hey, if you want to be a substitute for this team, we're going to put you on here, and that can put a fire under Armail's ass and hopefully make him do some more ballsy plays. But realistically, I don't think Immortals is going to go anywhere. As far as the entire LCS is concerned, and like the meta and whatnot, and what I think is going to be significant for this summer split, BO3s, obviously, this is going to put more pressure onto the coaching staff, and it's going to put more, I guess, prep work and homework for what the coaching staff can do. It's going to exude their influence onto their different rosters and everything like that. So keep that in mind. Enchanters are going to be meta because crit is going to be meta every time crit ADCs are meta, or late game ADCs are meta. Obviously, enchanters are going to be the things that are going to be played in the bot lane, which then means there's probably going to be less roams as well too. So it's going to be more 2v2. So the better 2v2 lanes are obviously going to be more prioritized. So think of player strength, think of player micro being significant, and all the marquee names are actually going to be able to show their stuff, which, we might see some surprises and whatnot because of that. And then, of course, crit marksmen are coming back. I'm seeing a lot of different things in high, elo solo queue, right? Of like Masters Plus is going to be all Jinx, obviously Caitlyn, Corki's coming back as an ADC, which builds crit and everything. You're seeing Tristana in the mid lane and whatnot. Maybe we may even see Kai'Sa, obviously Ashe. So there's going to be a lot of late game marksmen and whatnot, which is going to shape obviously the top lane, and it may shape the jungle as well too for playing jungle champions like maybe Sejuani as far as like front line. So we'll see, but there's my different rundown. I think to recap, it's going to be Dignitas, FlyQuest, Cloud9 for 3rd, Team Liquid for 4th, 100 Thieves for 5th, NRG for 6th, Shopify for 7th, and Immortals for 8th. So that's my power rankings, and I'm hoping for a good summer split.